The one last thing I wanted
Okay.
to prod your mind for, as a player who's played obviously both JP and like you play everything basically, what do you think the differences are between the two formats? Like I see a lot of JP players complain that like, oh, the English player base thinks that they're also different, that decks won't come over there and dominate, and then English players are also subsequently like, oh, well, how do you guys know this deck's going to come over here and dominate? So like, having playing both formats, like where do you see, what's the biggest difference between us and them, so to say?
So historically speaking, back in BT5, Japanese Lord Nightmon was like almost a tier 0 menace. It was everywhere. Like it was winning every single event, and it was just way too good. Come English, Lord Nightmon had by far the worst conversion rate in the entire BT5 format. Lord Nightmon didn't even have the most victories either. Lord Nightmon tied with green and black, actually, which is something that Japan had not seen. Because, for example, Grand Kuwagamon OTK, which is something that I had a hand in popularizing in America, if you remember that video, it actually originated from Hong Kong. Hong Kong was the original source of the Grand Kuwagamon OTK. And Japan had not adapted that for that format, and then come English BT5, well, Grand Kuwagamon OTK claps the fuck out of Lord Nightmon. So that's something we had going for us. Then you all had Black coming from Defeat Turbo, as well as the Black Toolbox using Blastmon, right? From Alex Mendoza, who saw results with that. So that alone is like something that's drastically different that from Japan. Come the later formats in BT7, for example, Cherubimon is something that did not exist in Japan. That is something that came from me and my friend group, right? We came up with yellow-based Purple Cherubi. That didn't exist in Japan, and that significantly warped the meta because that was a deck that beat the shit out of Yellow Hybrid. It did pretty well in the Blue Hybrid. Like, it was just a really good deck in general. We made Cherubimon a top 3 deck. Didn't exist in Japan.
I told you, Varney.
You never played it against me, so fuck you, buddy.
Bro, what are you talking about? Remember when we had that conversation when I mentioned that and during that format, and you were like, no, that ain't shit, blah, blah, blah.
I remember the conversation. I'm just saying you never played it against me, so it never happened
That's
against me.
because you didn't exist in our locals during that time.
I can't speak to that.
Right, but and the only reason that innovation came to be in the first place is because we saw that it wasn't working in Japan, and we wanted to cope a little bit, and we coped so well that happened, right? Also, Christmas Hybrid is another thing that blew up in English that didn't blow up in Japan, right? So there are a lot of innovations. Security Control is another great example. Security Control wasn't as huge in Japan in the earlier formats as it was in English. Our Security Control blew up in 1.5, which is Japan's equivalent of BT3, but Security Control didn't blow up in Japan until BT6. And we had Security Control as a relevant meta threat from 1.5 all the way to like even BT9, BT10, BT11. I mean, it's still, right? Like, it's
still, you still see it around.
Yeah. But like the point is, I think the biggest difference between our format and Japanese format is that Japan lays out the groundwork for us. We just take it and like keep running with it. You know, like we spend more time on the format than they did because we're playing catch up, right? But for players that play both formats, you're spending double the amount of time in those formats than the Japanese players are, right? And I think that's partially why we've come up with like some crazy ass adaptations that never saw success in Japan. And it's also a bit of a playstyle difference, I would say. Like, if you ever played other card games, Japan has they like to play what's good. If a top player doesn't say X deck is good, it's likely to go under the radar. Here in English, we'll smoke the crack pipe and we'll play whatever the fuck we want. Hexablau won an Oceania. Hexablau won an Oceania regionals back in PT5.
Yeah.
Shoutmon won a regionals in PT5. You know, that's something that didn't exist in Japan. That's also partially because Japan doesn't have as many large-scale events as we do. We have so many events compared to Japan. Japan, you have a fucking lottery system to get into an event, you know? And I don't know why One Piece gets all these big events and Digimon doesn't. Again, doesn't make sense to me. Whatever. I'm not here to talk about that, but I feel like there's a lot of like outside factors that are the major reason why we're seeing these differences in innovation. Japan is not entirely wrong. We're like, yeah, like, okay, Lord Nightmon's the best deck. We'll play Lord Nightmon. Cross Art's the best deck. We'll play Cross Art, right? They're not wrong in that. Their best deck is usually going to be our best deck for the most part. But the adaptations do come from just wanting to hit the crack pipe a little too hard. And we're just in the format for twice as long. That's
another deck too is Millet Loop is another one of those.
Oh my
I think that
goodness.
was more of a us thing than them.
So that's actually JP. That actually is
Really?
So Tessero is the one that popularized Millith Loop in English.
Yeah, that's the only reason I knew about it.
He got it from Japan.
wow,
Millith Loop is actually played primarily by Misao, who
Sounds
he
familiar.
was third place Worlds.
Okay.
Or-
yeah.
that's why.
Third or second place. It was one of the two. I don't remember exactly which one. But he went very far in Worlds. Misao is a very, very good player. And he was the one that popularized Lilith Loop. He was winning events in Japan with Millith Loop, right? And so Tessero adopted that for the English format. So that is something that we got from there.
All right. Well, that makes sense.
My
Makes a little
mistake.
bit more sense now. I mean, yeah. I look at Tessero and I'm like, yeah. Do I have a purple idea? Did Tessero come up with it? No. Okay, then it's probably not that good.